Hey everyone, we are back with notebook page 12, recording from the home studio here. And we're going to finish up this unit with this notebook page about perception. So if you haven't taken the title card down, you can take it down now. All right, let's go on to signal reception. And so, this notebook page, we're going to talk about how we perceive in our senses. And yeah, this signal reception was discovered by our guy here, Gustav Fechner, with his experiments on sound. And what he found was that humans have an absolute threshold. We have this kind of measurable minimum amount of stimulation that's required in order to detect a stimulus. So, for example, like 1 decibel in terms of sound marks the first amount of detectable sound. Anything less than that, we can't hear it. Doesn't matter. 5 photons of light, mark the smallest amount of light required for humans to detect. And both of those are still so low, they have to be accomplished with better than 50% accuracy. So you're not like guessing if you heard or saw something. When you do a test, so if I put headphones on you and randomly placed that 1 decibel in your ear, you might start hearing things. You might start thinking you hear it, but you don't. And so, if I get below 1 decibel, you might be able to kind of guess, but you're not going to be able to hear it consistently. So, our ability to distinguish various, these different stimuli increases in intensity, and that's known as the difference threshold, right? So, when can we tell the difference between one decibel and 2 decibels? Can we tell what that difference is? Do we know that it's definitely louder? That's difference threshold. And it can be used to defer to distinguishing between similar stimuli as well. Lastly, an unmeasurable but notable phenomenon is known as signal detection. And this is the ability to detect a weak stimulus among a mess of other stronger stimuli. So, signal detection is kind of based upon prior experience, expectations. It varies depending on the individual and the situation. So, for example, right, a mother or a father, they might hear a baby cry in a loud house, a room, or a party before others detect it. That's signal detection, right? Because they are kind of attuned to hearing their baby cry. And so based on their experiences, based on their expectations, that's something that they're worried about, something that they're going to hear. So I think that's a really good example of signal reception. So these are all ways of signal reception, but those are three. So those are kind of the big three things to take out of this slide: absolute threshold, that difference threshold, and signal detection. Let me put up the slide now. On to the next slide, which is signal perception. So this is kind of a different twist. We're able to detect stimuli that we are not aware of as well. So signals detected by our unconscious in a processing of our environment, absent of any conscious detection. So our brain will process things that we consciously don't see or hear or smell or taste, but our brain does process that information. So let me give you an example of how, that sounds weird. So kind of that idea of subliminal messaging, which is something we'll get into a little bit more, is a phenomenon where images, sounds are spliced in at such a fast rate that you're unable to detect them consciously, but they are processed unconsciously as part of our dual consciousness, something we talked about in the very first unit. And so, in fact, it can impact our intuition. This affects our perception, our judgment, our cognition without our awareness. And so, we'll get into some different experiments like this. One that we'll talk about further is the puppy werewolf image splicing experiment, where similar images of people's faces were shown to participants, along with images of a puppy or fierce werewolf spliced very quickly in. And participants, couldn't consciously detect the puppy or the werewolf, but they did. This unconscious processing was happening, and so they were able to perceive it, and it guided their intuition and judgment. So people rated those faces with the puppy spliced images as happier or nicer, even if they're the same, right? So kind of interesting. And we'll get in later to, does subliminal advertising work, things like that, versus subliminal messaging. So let me put up the slide here. Now, in your own words. To the next slide, which is processing information. So when we receive sensory information, there are roughly two approaches to processing and perceiving information: bottom up and top down. And bottom up processing is attempting to understand or perceive the object or stimulus with no prior knowledge. So all you have is what you can see, hear, touch, just kind of senses it. There's nothing else to indicate or help you process that image. So if you are given a tool that you've never seen, you first have to look at kind of the basic elements of it, like where's the metal, where's the rubber, what's the shape. You kind of have to work your way from the bottom up to figure out what its function is. On the other end, top-down processing perceives objects or stimuli based on prior experience or expectations. So, for example, if you're handed a tool you are familiar with, say a hammer or a wrench, you're able to immediately perceive the object's utility, quality, and role. You can immediately put the tool to expanded use for creating or fixing things, as your understanding of the tool based on prior experience guides, that guides your perception of the tool. You know what a hammer is used for. You know what a wrench is used for. You can guess in the environment what that's used for. So, we'll get a little bit more into this. We've already talked about it a little bit. When I showed you that up close picture of the dime, for example, that was a bottom up processing. You were looking at that picture, trying to figure out what it is based on the elements there. Looks metallic. It has these ridges, and so it became very difficult because you had nothing to work off of. Whereas some of the other images that we looked at were more top down, that you were able to use kind of that previous knowledge to build what it was. So we'll get more into it later. Let me put up the slide. Now, and you can see the images on the right are it maybe examples of that. If you were looking at the blank screen, that would be a bottom up processing, trying to figure out what that image is, and then in context, you can figure out what it is. That's top down. And move on to the next slide of attention phenomena. So, our conscious mind can be focused to one stimulus amongst many through a phenomenon known as selective attention. And this is seen by a conversation with a friend, in the middle of a party, right? So this is also known as the cocktail party effect, that you can have a conversation with someone at a party. You can kind of tune out the other commotion and sensory overload that's happening at the same time. But it's not difficult for stimuli to escape our perception when our conscious mind is focused on a particular stimulus or set of stimuli. For example, one can completely miss Easter eggs that in a TV show or a movie, right? Not actual Easter eggs, but if you've heard that term before, kind of hidden references, hidden images, that are presented in the periphery of the TV show or movie. When your conscious isn't affected on it, you're unlikely to notice subtle changes in the environment. We did that change blindness. We did that with the moonwalking bear and the basketball passes and the whodunit. You maybe notice a bigger change, but the smaller change is very difficult to see unless you're looking for them. And then sensory adaptation may occur when the body is overstimulated or stimulated in the same way for too long. So an example of this would be that you can't often smell yourself or smell your house, right? So if you have like a cat or a dog, you probably don't smell them unless there's a change in the stimulus. Unless unless the cat like pees on the carpet, you're probably not going to smell your cat. But someone that walks into your house for the first time will smell your cat, and it'll be probably pretty strong, right? So that can definitely happen. It can also be seen in one's ability to feel, your clothes after adjusting to the texture and temperature after putting them on. You kind of don't feel your clothes anymore. That's sensory adaptation. So let me put that slide up. On your own words now, and then we will move on to the next slide, which is Gestalt. And we've talked about Gestalt before in Unit 1. We'll go a little bit more into detail here. So, as I mentioned before, and I talked about when we watched the Ohio State Marching Band film, that, we have a predisposition as humans to see continuity, to interpret separate things as a whole. Like the image on the screen, you could see two faces, you could see a vase. You can't see both at the same time. That's Gestalt. You want to kind of create images out of this. So the cognitive or perceptual lens, it's called the Gestalt Principles. That's creating this whole meaning of stimuli when you get mixed or unintegrated pieces of information. So a couple examples. Figure ground is when the organization of the visual field into objects that stand out from their surroundings. So that's an example of the photo that we have on the notes right now. That, face or vases, you can only see one at a time. Grouping, to organize stimuli into coherent groups based on continuity, proximity, closure. If you were to draw 3 individual lines, putting them very close together, your brain, would see them as a single line or object, right? Even if there's a little bit of space between them. So that's a difference. I'm going to put up this slide. Down now. So, here's some examples of Gestalt. You don't have to write these down, but can know that it's here for reference, right? So we have, emergence, that we have these kind of lines that emerge into a whole image. Multi-stability, which is like the face vase thing, making a 2D image look like a 3D image, things like that. Refication, which is the illusionary contours. You see that ball with the spikes on it, even though it's not real. That ball doesn't exist. No one drew that ball, but the spikes make it seem that way. Invariance, it kind of deals with the 3D imaging again, but that you can actually picture all sides of an object that's drawn on a 2D surface. Closure, that we can have dotted lines and see them as connected. We know that's a square, we know that's a circle. Similarity, once again, is kind of putting individual small things in order. These are just a bunch of dots. You're seeing an S, you're seeing lines and rows. Proximity, that we can see things kind of that's the lines drawn over each other. That we might see things closer together than they actually are. And like each of these images on the proximity, they're all the same distance away, but you don't see that. And then continuity. We see this, but not this, right? Like you see that top image, we see a line, and we see kind of the wavy line. We don't see what was actually drawn is what's on the bottom right there. So interesting, interesting in how our mind works with Gestalt. To me, I think it's really cool. All right, let's do perception factors. Kind of deals with this too. Our brain's perception can be impacted by what we think or see first, as well as the context that we receive stimuli. So, a perceptual set, for example, is a mental disposition to see one thing over another. So we'll hit this a little bit afterwards. We did it when we looked at some of the perception things before. So the perceptual set phenomenon is when once you see a pattern or shape, it's something that's nearly impossible not to see that pattern or shape, right? So we did this with a lot of stimuli that we looked at. We looked at that. Do you see the guy's face or the girl's face first, right? And so whichever one you saw first is the one that kind of gets locked in. It becomes tough to find the other thing, and you have to really find it and see it. And then context effects can trigger varying perceptions based on the context or set of expectations that one has about an object, a sound, the touch. So if someone were talking about pioneers and said, the eels on the wagon broke, your brain's going to interpret that as wheel and not eel, right? Because there's no eels on the wagon. The eel on the wagon broke. So you will kind of make that happen, even if that because of the context, right? So this is why we misread some incorrect or misspelled words as correct. We saw those sentences with letters in them. We saw that meme where the words are mixed up. You didn't read it. You read it correctly, not with the mixed up words. That's context, and your brain does that automatically. All right, go ahead, take this one down now. All right. So here's I mentioned this before. This is the classic duck or rabbit image. So like, which one do you see first? I always see the duck first, and so it becomes hard for me to shift my vision to see the rabbit, right? And that's a perceptual set. You see that duck first, or you see that rabbit first. It's tough to see the other one. You have to really push yourself to do so. All right, and then our final slide is just kind of cleaning up some people, and this is going to be one of those things, the AP test, you will have to know some people and what they did. And there's additional ones that maybe we haven't talked about in each unit that I'll share with you down the line. But we have our guys. I talked about Gustav Fechner before, but him and Ernst Weber with the absolute threshold experiments with light and sound. We also have David Hubble and Torsten Wiesel, who they did feature receptors, the visual cortex research, motion detection. Face, when you watch those videos of face blindness, a lot of that research that they did has been used in that. So let me put up the slide real quick, very short. So you can write this one down. And then once you're done with Unit 3, that's all the notes for Unit 3. And we'll be wrapping it up. Thank you.